KG Subramanian, Manida, one of India's most senior artists, has worked with diverse media and materials, exhibiting extensively both within and outside the country. He is known as much for his wide-ranging scholarship as for his artworks, which are full of wit, subversion, eroticism, and critical social commentary. A major retrospective of his work was held at the National Gallery of Modern Art, New Delhi in the year 2003. He has been a part of the arts faculty at MS University, Baroda, and is Professor Emeritus at Kala Bhavan, Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan.
He is an inspiring artist and a man. As a human being, we can see him. He is 90 years old, laughing. He can recognize each and everyone, and he's talking with them and giving them his advices to his student. It was inspiring man. You see, it is rather rare to get an artist, a man like that.
For very few are bestowed with a life of the kind that this gentleman lived. 90 years, a vision that expanses the diverse modes of creative expression, whether it be writing, painting, mural, toy making, etc. I'm privileged. I'm privileged because I happen to be his student.
Nobody will believe when you meet Mani that these paintings are his if you're an outsider, because there are not only a lot of movement, a lot of mischief, a lot of erotica, and the brush strokes are like a 20-year-old young man. He's a very dear friend of mine, although he's much older than me. We have known each other for 50 years. The very fact he's from Kerala, studied in Shantiniketan and worked in Weaver Service Center in design, and then taught in the Faculty of Fine Arts in Vishwabharati, in MS University. So he is this multifarious person. I knew Ramkinkar Bej, his guru. When I was a young artist from Bombay, I used to go to Shantiniketan in the late 50s. And after Ramkinkar Bej, I think there is one artist who is a total artist, is Mani.
Well, it's indeed a great pleasure for me to make a film on KG Subramanian, our revered Manida.
Yes.
Revered by all. And we are standing in front of some of his drawings. He calls that I'm a doodler.
Yes.
I said, so you said 90 years. I think he's not 90 years. He's a young man. See the vast, body of work at this age is unbelievable, especially reverse paintings. And it was a great experience for me, because I remember I had the same feeling what I had while making a film on Ustad Bismillah Khan.
Which year was that?
Way back in 1989.
Right.
Then I realized there are many artists but few savants, sadhak. You find many artists but sadhak is rare.
Right.
That I found in Bismillah Khan. And the same thing happened with Manida.
Gulam Bhai, how long has your association been with KG Subramanian?
Well, I have known Mani Sahib ever since I came to Baroda in 1955. You can count the number of years. And even when he was in Shantiniketan for a short period of, not for a short, a number of years, we continued to keep contact with each other. So that way it is a very personal, very old relationship.
I first met him in '76 when he came to Shantiniketan for a year as a visiting professor. And that was my first encounter, and that 1 year he spent, I really got to know him closely, see him work and interacted with him a great deal. And then he went away. I was a student. I was doing my third year of undergraduate studies.
Right.
So that was a very useful encounter. And then by the time I finished my undergraduate course, he came back on a permanent post as the professor of painting. So since then I have had a continuous association with him.
Yes.
Yes, and so from 1980, when he came back, I have had this opportunity to, see his work very closely, observe him at work, document most of the work he was doing.
Since '84, when we first met, I was sort of reincarnated in my third birth as a publisher, and I first met him as a publisher, and then later I pestered him to do an exhibition, and we started to show him in '89 for the first time, and then it became a relationship which sort of grew parallelly, both as publisher and as somebody who presented art. And for us, he's also been that other thing, which is a father figure. So he's been a kind of paternal presence through many things.
He was a very spontaneous teacher. He would sit down on the floor, and we were still junior, but Shanti Dave or Jyoti Bhatt or other who were our seniors, if he was discussing something, he would even draw on the floor. And he would start the dialogue, and there it would begin, and we would all sit and watch.
I think he is one of the most fantastic teachers I have come across. And he's taught us how to work with various mediums. And that is a lot of us from my generation has learned how to handle things, how to handle any medium, and to speak in the language of the medium. That was important.
He experimented with a number of things. One of the things that he did in those days is when he was, originally associated with the Weaver Service Center in Bombay. He went there, he left Baroda for a couple of years, but he returned. During that time, there was this World Fair. And for the World Fair, he made a woven structure. He himself wove it. And that became a precursor for all others, to follow. Mrunalini is, of course, student, but Mani Saab used to have a loom in his own studio. And he used to, but that one went to the World Fair, and it was a major thing. Unfortunately, there is no record of it. There is no photographic record of it. And I think it opened doors to the crafts of India, on the world scene. He and Shankar Chaudhary and others also initiated what we call the Fine Arts Fair. This is to open the doors of a kind of a institution at the university level to the people of Baroda. He said, we will do it, we will make things for people, because people, when we do things like toys, we make books for children, we'll make lanterns, we do such things, so that people would come and look at them, and in the end they might also look at the paintings which are hanging on the wall. This is how we would initiate them. So we had exhibition alongside all the, and all of us joined in. So he would make toys, he made in clay, he made in wood, he made in, but he was all, and leather. He sort of used to work, and you could see literally, somebody should have made a film of him on how he worked with it. It's amazing how he manipulates. The word manipulate has something to do with hand, mano, no man. Yes. So in a way, it is the actually working of the hand and a great mind behind it.
For me, Manida is like a magician. My experience as a designer for 25 years totally inspired, and I learned from him. The knowledge of material, the way he handles the form and technique is fascinating. He is so comfortable with material, and in craft, material is the most important thing. And I work in the villages, remembering that main intention, main approach, that simple Gandhian way, and whatever material I used to use from same area, that I learned from him, that basic material should be local, not imported by any state also.
And Mani Saab has this great kind of a regard for these craftspersons. And I remember one such instance that All of us had gone to Abu. He had never been to Abu, so he said, let's make a trip of Abu. And then on the way, we went to Mehsana and went to Patan. Now Patan, I suppose everybody knows, that is known for patola. And there are only few families left who weave patola, This is a fantastic ikat there, And so there was this man who was a chief weaver, senior man. He was very reticent. So we tried to. So I said, I spoke in Gujarati and I said, "Amara sahib che baat karvi tamane." But it took, I would say, about 3 minutes for them both to get along. In no time, they both started chatting, and this man started narrating story of the Andhra connection, the connection of the kind of thing Hop and Weft they did, how they. And it was amazing. Here was somebody who had not only just, but he knew which nerve to touch. And that is how that man, the great weaver, opened up. Great learning for us. But I think there is something of a true craftsperson in him, which is. It's actually the instinct, of the craftsperson, which is still alive in him. So he works with his hand. It's manual, and he loves that. He wants to do things by himself. That's why, if he does murals and paints the entire building, he does it all by himself. That's right. And that is, I think, the one sort of particular thing which pins him down to think that it is something which you can do with your own hand. I think it is Gandhian. To my mind, do it what you can do with your own hands. Try it. You may fail, but try it and take risks. And he has done that, which we learned from him.
In Manida, I found, of course, it's very modern, his works.
Right.
But there is a link with the living tradition. He himself says this is a living tradition.
Yes.
Not just art and craft or craftsmen or artisans. It's a living tradition of our culture.
Right.
So that's why, I want to bring certain things which he has written several times about our own living tradition.
So the reference points is what you're trying to search.
Both, because he has Shantiniketan period, a chapter,
Yes.
and Baroda chapter.
Yes.
So I want to bring both sort of crafts from the west and also from the east. And Manida is a kind of a, he's basically an alchemy, you can call it. It's an alchemy of so many elements together.
Yes.
And there's a kind of sense that he's got thousands of years of everything that we've all had in terms of culture, history, art, whatever you like, at his fingertips. So when he's actually creating, I've often heard people asking him things like, so how long does it take to complete a painting? And he's always snapped his fingers and said, that's the time it takes, because all of the prehistory comes into that single moment. When he's executing, it just happens. So a man with that kind of sense of freedom.
And Shivakumar, about the palette, how it has changed, or even about the paintings themselves, the compositions, the figures that have come in now. Would you also like to share with us some of your memories, early memories of how it was then?
Yeah, there are perhaps two sides. Many people think that Manida and the whole Shantiniketan school is largely drawing based.
That's right.
And linear, which is not untrue, but in the case of Manida, there is this additional thing that while a lot of it is graphic, but his use of color is much more precise and much more kind of thought out. There was always a kind of very clear understanding of how color behaved, and I think at least from the 70s he has been more sensitive towards that aspect. So, and without that, paintings like these, especially paintings on glass or what you call reverse paintings, wouldn't work.
Tell me a little more about the reverse paintings.
Of course, what it basically means is that you paint from on the back of the surface rather on the front of the surface. So you need a transparent surface. Initially you use glass, but since glass breaks very easily, he began to use perspex and various other new transparent materials that has come out since then. So what you do is you paint behind the surface, but when you do that, the first thing you have to do is all the details that you do at the end of a painting. Normally when you paint on a surface, you have to do that at the beginning. So you have to really work backwards. It's like, I mean, from
But you have to be so sure of yourself.
Yes, that's right.
About the effect of the painting, that,
Yeah,
that you know exactly
have a clearer idea of what's to be done.
Yes.
And since he doesn't work with a clear layout, so it is all mental. And that's one thing. And the second thing is that the final effect you see is a cumulative effect of the different layers of color you have used. So in many cases, very often, I mean, what he does is he begins with a monochrome.
Yes.
Although when you look at the painting, you never think that this is a monochrome to start with. But he usually uses a monochrome, and in the beginning sometimes it used to be a brown watercolor wash with which he used to paint all the images and put the kind of thing and the details. Then from behind, he would back that up with different colors. And when you back it up, then the colors in the front changes. So you should have to be very sensitive to how the color interacts, that the color in the front and the color behind would interact, and then you would see something else happening in the front.
Yes.
So this is something, a very good understanding of how color works together and how it would react one against the other is necessary to do a real good painting, reverse painting. Yes. I was trying to suggest that the palette itself might not have changed very much, the range of colors, but maybe the quantum of different colors have, the proportions of different colors in the painting, that has shifted. And well, it looks brighter or less brighter in terms of how you juxtapose one color with the other. So one idea of juxtaposition is one behind the other. The other juxtaposition is one beside the other. Now this is something very important. I mean, just to illustrate this, maybe when we first went to Shantiniketan, most of our teachers then, I mean, who had, you know, trained in the traditional school, said you should use terravert and you should yellow, Indian red, and maybe black and kind of thing. I mean, all earth colors and how to paint. And usually it turned out to be quite dull. Yeah, because, and then Manida came, and using the same colors, he made students do brighter works. And what I realized was, it was the juxtaposition of colors.
I liked it, the fact that you called the drawings a kind of riyaz, a kind of a practice. Why did you feel that way?
No, because there is something that every artist probably develops a certain schema of images and to represent what you see. I mean, you're not transcribing what you see exactly, but you develop a schema and then you play around with that. But when you do that, usually what happens is that you forget about the original. You are playing around with the schemas you develop. And in the process, you might, the link between the two might be destroyed. And finally, the schemas then become lifeless. So what you do is that he constantly keeps this two, the contact is being re-explored. And he uses a drawing to re-explore this contact between what one sees in the world and what one makes in an image. And the drawing really, I think, plays that role. And that's a continuous process. And that's probably why when he kind of twists and turns an image or an animal, kind of do various things, it still kind of keeps its organic, I mean, unity. Because you also learn then how you can manipulate the schema.
Distort it or contort it, but even then somewhere that...
Yeah, because you are always keeping both of them in sight. You're not just looking at the real or forgetting that and then playing around with the thing. So this relationship or the connection has to be continuously kept in mind and explored.
What I do, I also choose frames, you know, choose my space. That is, but I do it optically with lenses. But an artist with his pen and brush
Right.
also uses the space. That space is his own choice. I want to see this. I want to elevate certain things. So elimination and choosing. This is a very important thing for any visual artist, whether he's a painter or a filmmaker, whoever. That's very, very important. I found in him that, it's incredible combination of things, whether it is from Picasso or from African art, our own living tradition.
Yes.
So, but it's very original.
And-
Because he's a very cerebral person.
And Gautam, we were having a chat a little while ago, and
Yeah.
you were talking about this process when he was working on this painting,
Yeah.
and you were shooting him from the other side,
Yeah, reverse painting, yeah.
the reverse painting that he was
That was
working
very
on.
interesting, one of my favorite shots in the film, because he was doing a glass painting reverse, and I was shooting, head on almost, and I could see his eyes, his movement, his fingers, and slowly, it gets covered with color and he disappears. It's very interesting. And what I found that this man is untiring. And so it's not a surprise for me to see so many things at this age.
Yes.
He has done it in few months, I believe.
Yes, yes.
Because he himself said, I always doodle, because it's a kind of a practice. And very, very, very aware person.
Yes.
Socially, politically, is very aware, right from the student days, I believe, because he was participated in 42 movements at
That's
Gandhiji
right.
and all that. But still, he's very alive and aware.
Every year at the New Year, he sends us a painted card. I must be having at least 30 of them. And not me alone. There are a number of people to whom he sends a painted card. It's not printed. Even today he does it. There is something in which he enjoys himself. He wants to connect with people with, both by sending a card but with his hand. So you see a little signature there. I mean his work. So you see that, हाँ ये तो मणि साहब का ही होना चाहिए. इसमें क्या है? इसमें एक कुत्ता होगा या छोटा सा कोई गधे की बात होगा, एक कोई क्या मुर्गा होगा या दो प्लांट हो गए या कहीं पाम ट्री हो गया, बस कुछ ना कुछ होता है. It's a whole, he has a vast repertoire, but he plays with all these things.
One of our leading art historians, if you like, and literature as in, I would say the poetry part of it certainly falls into that. So there's poetry, there's all these wonderful things on art.
And there are his letters that
There
he's
are
exchanged.
letters, because he's constantly being approached for all kinds of things, on issues of public art, in which he has not just opinions, but solutions, because he's the kind of person who will write you a scathing letter about some art education thing, but it just won't end there. The letter will have a solution, an agenda, a possibility. This is how you do it, as he was doing today. So, so there are letters, there are all kinds of exchanges, there are occasional lectures, talks. So this is like a man who produces so much.
It was around, I think it is 1960, if I'm not mistaken, when there was Rabindra centenary, or 61. When one of my mentors, one of my gurus called Bhogilal Gandhi, is an old Marxist and Gandhian. That odd combination, but it was in him. And Mani Sahib knew him. And another guru was Suresh Joshi. And I was associated with the publishing of a journal called Vishwamanav. And they were all beholden to Tagore. And Suresh Bhai had translated a number of works of Tagore into Gujarati, fantastic translations. And Bhogi Bhai and his wife, Subhadra Ben, has also translated Tagore into Gujarati. So we had grown up on those writings. But he wanted to publish a special number, in fact a book called Rabindra Darshan. And I was a young student. This was the time when I was doing my master's. And I had already started writing in his journal called Vishwamanav. I was writing a series of articles on art. So he said, no, we want you to write on the paintings of Tagore. I looked at him and I said, look, this is not something which I can do, but my teacher can do. Would you like me to speak to him? And so Bhogibhai said, why? Go ahead. So I went to Mani Sahib and I said, Mani Sahib, look, here is this request from Bhogilal Gandhi, and he would like somebody to write on the paintings of Tagore, and would you please do it? I have come as a messenger. So he said, yeah, of course, I'll do it. And he wrote that piece, and it was translated into Gujarati, and as you know, that was some sort of a beginning of his serious writing on art. So he later reminded me, he said, you made me write that. I said, look, your first article is published in Gujarati. And about his writing, I think something, I don't know, I mean, I have not studied English language formally, but what I see is the way in which he writes it very easily, but he expresses a very complex idea in that. Nobody writes the way he writes. He wrote about various things, but among it there is an essay which is, to my mind, is a seminal essay. It's called Art and Religion in India. Okay. It's short essay, but I think it's classic. It talks about the layers in which our culture exists. And he says, how many layers, and where do you enter? You can enter from here, come out from there, enter again, and how do you read? And I think that, so how does it come? It comes to him so naturally and so spontaneously. So even I think with regard to the way language is used, I would say that there is also, similarly, as in his work, a kind of spontaneity which you notice.
So there's a kind of dailiness to what he writes, what he paints, and it all happens. Shobhanath used to say that. I don't know how this money does it. He's constantly writing at the same time, he's painting. I just do one thing at a time. So,
I would put it in a slightly different way. We are all lazy. We don't use the time that we have at our disposal. Mani Sahib uses all the time that at his disposal. So he can do things. So he sets an example. So you can do it. What is it? You have plenty of time. But you while it away, in all kinds of things. But he puts it to use, he makes something, he writes.
Really amazing. He worked, used so many medias. Mm-hmm. And, it was seamless from one media to another. And that is amazing. And what I found, he's such a great painter, great artist, but yet so down to earth. And I found a bliss in him.
The new encounter. When you get on in years and the body's fire runs cold, and in the heart's hammock lies an aching emptiness, the sunbeams tip with gold, the sockets of your eyes and the garden flowers' laughter goes tinkling in your ears. And in the vision of the world, crowded with bird and beast, you see your wishes' flag unfurled, as in a holy feast. It is like the mind has molted, cast off its crackled skin, and a bodiless body stepped out from the wizened bones within and hurtled through the wall of flesh. Into the heart of things, the grass is green, the rose is red, the earth's warm brown, the eyeless winds, the open blues of the endless skies, and those little dramas of birds and beasts, or the nameless humans in the streets.